One of the questions we keep asking is whether the future of the Republican Party is in Mitt Romney, is it in Lindsey Graham, or is it in Marjorie Taylor Greene? Mitt Romney being, at this point anyway, an anti-Trump Republican, Lindsey Graham being a formerly anti-Trump Republican who now is on the Trump side and seems to like golfing with Trump and being in the good graces of what was then a current and now former president, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, who exists as an elected official only because of Trump and came to power by riding the full-on QAnon Trumpian wing of the Republican Party. And part of it, as I've said before, depends on what Donald Trump's presence or lack thereof ends up being, meaning what does Trump decide to do? Based on his letter that we looked at earlier today, it seems Donald Trump is planning to at least try to remain involved in the Republican Party and American politics for the time being. But there's another factor here, which is the electorate. The Republican electorate, because remember that without a wacky Republican electorate, Trump's candidacy in 2016 goes nowhere. If Trump ran in the Democratic primary, he would have gotten nowhere because Democratic primary voters would never have been bamboozled into making Donald Trump the nominee. So one of the things that 2016 showed us was that the electorate matters and that the electorates are dramatically different in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Ronald Brownstein wrote a very interesting op-ed for CNN where he asks whether the extremist wing of the Republican Party may be too big to fail. And there are certain numbers that tell us that, yes, there are way too many completely radicalized, extreme Republicans for them to be relegated to political obscurity and irrelevance, maybe even if Donald Trump goes quietly into the night and opts out of American politics, which again, for now, it doesn't seem like he's looking to do. And as Brownstein points out in this article, the American Enterprise Institute, a right-wing think tank, did a poll and found that nearly a third of Republicans embrace the convoluted QAnon conspiracy theory that Marjorie Taylor Greene has been espousing, that Trump is defending the country against this sort of a cabal of child sex traffickers. A third of Republicans believe that. 1/6 to 1/5 of Republicans have praised the January 6th riots in polling from Quinnipiac. 55% of Republicans agree that, quote, we may have to use force to save the American way of life. 4 in 10 agree with the phrase, if elected leaders will not protect America, the people must do it themselves, even if it requires taking violent actions. Vanderbilt University did a study and found that 51% of Republicans agree with the statement that, quote, we may have to use force to save the traditional American way of life. 4 in 10 back the idea that a time will come when patriotic Americans have to take the law into their own hands. And in the American Enterprise Institute poll, half of Republicans said that the attack on January 6th was engineered not by Trumpists, but by Antifa. These aren't fringes when so many people believe this stuff. These aren't 5, 7, 11% beliefs in the Republican Party. So yes, we should be afraid, because if that contingent takes over the party for the long term, it's a dystopian nightmare. Now, I think it bears repeating that Trump didn't create most of this. These extremists have been around in American politics for a long time. They just didn't always vote. They weren't always public about their beliefs, and they didn't have a candidate that coalesced them and brought them out. And that's what's so dangerous about what's going on right now. So the best scenario is that the party is split. The Romneys have to fight the Lindsey Grahams and the QAnon people, and they all end up so busy fighting each other that they end up unable to stop Joe Biden and Democrats from hopefully getting things done. Now, Mitch McConnell knows that that's the risk. Part of Mitch McConnell voting not guilty on conviction on Saturday and then giving a speech saying how Donald Trump is practically speaking and morally speaking completely responsible for the riots. Part of this is Mitch McConnell desperate to figure out a way to not be tied up in fighting so that he can get back to what he's an expert in. And I say that not joking. He's really an expert in obstructing Democrats from getting anything done. The best case scenario is that they end up infighting and aren't able to obstruct. The worst case scenario is really bad. And it includes that they are able to obstruct and these Trumpian clowns, the QAnon types, continue getting elected in the future. And that gets me really to the next thing I want to talk about, which is that this is a problem that is much bigger than one insurrection. The insurrection is a lens. It's not really a mirror, but in a sense it's a mirror. It's a one-way mirror that lets us look at the bigger problem of radicalization. So I want to talk about that next.